In our previous lectures, we have seen how to bootstrap a new Spring project. So in this particular lecture, we will be doing a Hello World example. So what we are going to learn in this particular lecture? Since we are dealing with REST-based web applications, so in this particular lecture, we will see how we get a response from servers once we do a request. So what we are going to make it here is that once you type a URL in your browser, so in this case we will be typing like localhost 8080 greetings, all you need to get is a response. So once this request is made from the browser, you will get a response of hello world. We will see it in detail, and currently let's start coding for this particular example. So we already had an application from our last lecture. So in this particular lecture, we will use the same application and create a controller which will handle the incoming request and will give the response. So let us start by creating a controller. We will call it user controller. Let us make a separate packages for our controllers. So now once we have a controller, Spring should know that this particular class will act as a controller. So all we need to do is to annotate it with @controller or @REST-controller. Since we are dealing with REST-based application, we will annotate it with REST controller. So now let us add a mapping for handling this request, which is called request mapping. So we will create a method, say greetings, which returns a string of hello world. And since it has to return a string, so let us return hello world. But how will the server will know that we have to hit to this particular method? In order to do that, we will have to map that particular incoming request to this method. In Spring, or say in Spring Boot, we will do it by adding an annotation called @request mapping. So once we have added the request mapping and imported the particular class, so all we need to do is to say that this request mapping is for path greetings. By default, once we write a URL, it is of type get. But if you would want to do a post or something else, that also you can decide. But here, since this method is get, so we'll just add request method dot get. So let me tell you that even if you do not write method as request method get, it will still work, because by default it will be a get method. But since we have added it, so let us test it now. So there is one more way to start your application, which is the boot dashboard. You get boot dashboard once you are doing your coding via STS. So all we need to do is to go here and start our application. Once it starts, you will see that the server has started on port 8080, and we will be writing localhost 8080/greetings, and that greetings will be mapped from here, and we are expecting that a hello world will come. So it is working. So what has happened in this particular lecture? Let us see in detail. In any web-based technology, once we have an incoming request, we are expected to give some response. In order to give response, server must know how to respond to a request. In Spring World, we call it mapping a request. If server has a controller which has a request mapping present to cater the need of the incoming request, it will respond appropriately, or we will get infamous error like 404. So once server receives a request, it will look for a file which does have the request mapping. And once it finds that particular file which has a class which does have the method which is intended to handle the incoming request, it will give you the response. Here in this class, which is say user controller, we do have few annotations like REST controller and request mapping. So REST controller is annotated above the class and the request mapping is over the method which is intended to handle this greetings request. So you see this greeting, which is the incoming request, is mapped to this method which is inside the user controller. So once it receives such a request for which the mapping is present, all it does that it will return you the response, which is nothing but the hello world.